Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Mason Brown. I'm the guy who sits in this chair, and you're the person who sits wherever you are. Today we come back around to the third in my series of videos on a few of my favorite things. My goal in launching this series was to give a little bit of an introduction. I've gone over a few of my favorite things movies edition. I've gone over a few of my favorite things YouTuber editions. You can check those out down on my page. This video is going to be on a few of my favorite things books. Now, I was homeschooled. I know that's probably a shock to a lot of you. And being homeschooled meant that I had a lot of time dedicated to reading. I was very encouraged to read, and I loved reading. I still do. And I have been doing it for, as long back as I can remember. I've been an avid reader of a variety of different books, different types of books within different genres, different series. Some that are more historical, some that are more classic, some that are more modern, contemporary. So I've read a good range of books. Although in creating this list, I realized just how small of a portion of books I've actually read. There's a lot more books, a lot of books in different genres and different types that I want to read and want to appreciate more. And I think you'll agree, as watching through this video, as I go through this list, you'll see a lot of commonality. It, I think, for one, speaks to my interests, my passions, things within which that I'm very actively pursuing. But I think it also speaks to that, I could read some more different types of books and different sorts of things. So I want to lead into that as well. And as I've said in previous videos on my favorite movies and favorite YouTubers, this is by no means an absolute list of my favorite books that I've ever read. I had a hard time picking out books that I remember reading that have impacted me, and this is kind of the list that it boiled down to. But these are some that I feel have shaped me in some way, that have motivated or moved me or opened my eyes in different ways. And you'll likely recognize a lot of the books that I put on my list here. They're pretty popular, pretty well-known books. Nothing breaking the mold here. A lot of popular titles, but I guess it just goes to show you I must be a popular guy. But without further ado, on to my list of a few of my favorite things, books edition. First up on my list, I have The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. This will probably come to no surprise for most of those who know me. This is a book series that me and my family has been passionate about growing up. Narnia was a big deal in our household, as it was, I imagine, for most people within the circles that I've been involved in. A lot of the fantasy elements, a lot of the fiction, and a lot of the sort of the spiritual allegory overtones were kind of right in the culture when I was growing up, and these books really impacted my parents, and as a result, they read them to us growing up. And as a result, it's a sort of a generational impact that these books have had. In many ways, the Chronicles of Narnia series has impacted my childhood, as I've previously mentioned, with sort of the family aspect of it. But they're also probably the first book series that I remember reading on my own. I imagine there were other book series. I remember reading some other, younger reader books. But this is the first one that really stuck with me. And I think C.S. Lewis does a great job of making these stories accessible and understandable, but also applying themes that are relevant to people in all lines of, all areas of life. There's elements of heroism and heartbreak. There's family issues that are brought up and resolved, especially with siblings, especially in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the first in the series. But just going back and forth. C.S. Lewis does a good job in the narrative of breaking up the stories into very unique snippets, the stories that you read, with some character crossover and some that are completely unrelated, or at least tangentially related. And really, the series spans from the creation of Narnia to its end in the last battle, which I think really kind of puts into perspective a lot of the story and the elements within, and just the way that you observe it in similar ways with the Pevensey children and Eustace and Jill and so many of these other characters that cross over into this magical land. Just seeing how they relate to it, it impressed upon me as a young child, that the sort of the beginning and the end, sort of the full scope of a story, the full scope of a world, from its inception to its end, and a triumphant end at that. But I think there's a lot to be said for how this is. It's made me view life, how it has made me view good and evil, and sort of character complexity, because not all the title characters, or not all the characters that are the protagonists within these stories, are likable people. And so even within that, you don't have kind of your classic hero types. You have children who are selfish and rude at times, and you kind of get a full range and appreciation and development on those characters. And of course, the Chronicles of Narnia is a fantasy series, first and foremost. There are certainly elements that are drawn from our world, people literally drawn from our world into the magical world of Narnia, but there's a lot of inspirations from folklore and fairy tales. There's epic battles and conflicts. There's dragons and sea serpents and magic and wizards, talking animals, centaurs, minotaurs, all sorts of fantastical creatures and elements. There's different kingdoms and different nations and the way that they interact together. You have sort of this mysterious kind of ephemeral like magic. This ancient magic that goes back to Aslan and whoever his father is, and kind of the land beyond, and there's sort of the kind of the edge of the world that they breach. There's so many fantastical elements in this that I think are inspiration for a lot of the stories that I tell, a lot of the things. I think there's definitely the seed of fantasy that is put within these books that was planted and blossomed within me to foster a love for fantasy. I remember after reading these books, my siblings and I, we would go out in our yard, and we would pretend that we were knights and wizards, and that we were fighting dragons and, orcs or goblins, and that we were, protecting a kingdom, and we would be outside making absolute fools out of ourselves and loving it. And I think that fantasy grounding, I think, really started with the Chronicles of Narnia. And just like I was mentioning, the Chronicles of Narnia for me really planted seeds of imagination and inspiration that I've taken with me to this day. I think the sense of magic and kind of the wonder that is associated with it. And while some of the books are much more magical and much more wonderful than others that are a little bit darker, a little bit more distanced from the wonder. And you kind of get to see different elements within the world and characters within the world that act separately from some of the primary characters. I'm thinking mainly of the horse and his boy. But you get stories kind of from all throughout these magical lands, from everywhere within its history. And I think that, for me, again, has really kind of prompted me to question within my own writing, within whether it be fantasy or if I'm, running a game of Dungeons and Dragons, or, just sharing a story with friends. It puts within the scope of kind of the birth and the death of a world, and the fantasy and the characters within it, how they respond, how the magic interacts, and just seeing how all of that kind of grows together through the eyes of young British children, I think it's really fascinating, and I think it really I haven't done a reread in a while. I think it's something that I'm definitely due for, and I think that'd be interesting to revisit on my channel, do some book reviews of the Chronicles of Narnia. If you're interested in that, let me know, and I definitely want to do that. But yeah, these books have really spoken to me throughout childhood and even as a developing young man. But these books have definitely left an impact. Next up on my list is The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown. And yeah, trust me, I'm just as shocked as you are that this showed up on my list. This was not a book that I expected to enjoy as much as I did. So I had actually seen the movie before reading the book. And obviously there's some messages in the book that are not entirely accurate. A lot of the twisting of history and the narrative, it's very interesting, makes for an interesting thought experiment. But upon doing further research on some things, it just there were some things in there that just didn't line up. And I've actually read a number of the series in Dan Brown's series. I think they're called like the Langstrom series. I'll look up the title of the series and I'll post it up. For me, the main takeaway, the main inspiration, the reason that I actually put this on my list is because of the adventure. It's because of the mystery and the it's right in the title, the code. The codes and clues, I think, are something that Dan Brown does a really good job of kind of writing out and kind of stringing you along with these puzzles and riddles that are, at least in the way that they're written into the book, they're very enticing, and he does a good job of stringing those along as you get to see them with the characters, get to kind of try and break them down yourself. Look at how the characters break them down, try to engage with them and kind of see where the story is going. I've listened to a couple of these on audio tape, but I would definitely recommend reading them. And again, there's a lot of historical fantasy or historical fiction, whatever you want to call it, that's kind of like written into these. And definitely take it with a grain of salt, do some of your own research. But I think they make for really interesting stories. And I just love sort of the idea of clues that have been left behind and hidden in plain sight. I've talked about this before in other videos, and I will talk about it again. How much I love treasure hunts with classic clues and riddles and things that kind of point to other things, hidden symbols or whatever you will. This very much kind of made me feel the same way that National Treasure made me feel. You can see how I feel about that in my video on a few of my favorite things movies. But this book sort of gave me a similar vibe, definitely, with kind of the conspiracy theories and the codes that have been kind of left behind for centuries for only the smart and the willing to pursue. And that's actually something else that I really liked about the books that I've read in this series, is sort of the vast conspiracies that lay just beneath the surface of our society. Whether it be secret cults or, secrets in the Vatican, or it's, mysterious killers who are leaving behind clues, or whatever it might be, that there's sort of a false history that's kind of been underlaying our understanding of our world, each one of which would kind of flip our understanding of reality, or the historical narrative. I think they make for really interesting books. Like I said, kind of, read them if you will, do your own research and do your own thinking, your own critical thinking. But I think they make for fun stories. I really enjoyed them, and I'm surprised I made it onto my list, but I'm gonna stand by it. I enjoy these. Next up on my list is the Redwall series by Brian Jakes. This is a terrific series. If you haven't had a chance to read, I definitely recommend it. One of the great things about these books is that they are written really in no particular order. There are a few books in the series that do kind of tie together, piece together and kind of follow the same characters, but most of them kind of jump around in a timeline and are their own individual stories set within Mossflower. But most of these stories are separate, individualized stories that are set within the kind of the mythos, the legends of the Redwall series, kind of set within the forest of Mossflower. I keep saying that wrong. Mossflower. They have great characters. They're really fun. There's like 20 in the book series by the time that he finished writing and unfortunately passed away. But I think they make for great reads. I definitely recommend it. One thing that I love about this series is the cast of characters. These books are full of furry friends, and the first book, Redwall, follows Matthias as he sort of embarks on this heroic adventure with the sword of Martin, I believe. I may have to do some research before posting this up. But they're all set within kind of Redwall as this abbey in the middle of Mossflower. Each of these books cover kind of a wide cast, a large cast of characters. There's badgers and hares and voles and otters and squirrels and rats and cats and ferrets and weasels. All sorts of kind of like woodland critters that are generally kind of put into various categories as far as kind of the gentler, more peaceful species, and those that are a little bit more sinister, that are definitely cruel and typically the antagonists within the stories. But Brian Jakes does a great job of individualizing the characters, giving them each their own voices. Even going as far as to create some really interesting dialects for different kinds of animals. I'm thinking mostly of the moles, who are very hard to understand, but they're very funny. And there's just a great tone that's kind of set with these characters and with these books. Plus they're all cuddly, which makes for a fun little storytelling. But not only are these characters cute, they're courageous. There's some real epic adventures, very cathartic moments. The good characters are very good. The evil characters are very cruel. There's always sort of an epic quest that they're going on to find something, to find a lost history, or to reclaim something, to get revenge, or to protect. There's sort of medieval heroics that are in all of these, regardless of whether the characters are wielding the sword or wielding any number of other items. Some of my favorite stories are set within the Badger Mountain of... Some of my favorite stories within the series take place in the Badger Mountain fortress of Salamandastron, where these great, large badger warriors who are very noble, but some have a tendency to kind of go into almost like a berserker-like rage as they take on the forces of evil. There's some very compelling storytelling going on within these books, and there, like I said, there's close to 20. Or there may actually be over 20. I haven't read all of them in the series, but every one that I've read, I've loved. And definitely something I would like to revisit. And it looks like we're all going to be revisiting because Netflix has announced they're working on a series, an animated series I'm very much looking forward to. More on that as news comes out. Another thing that I really appreciate about this series is the complex narrative tone. It's easy to dismiss these books as, oh, they're kind of like cute woodland critters, but there's really a lot of complexity to the stories told within here. Each characters have their own characterization, their own motivations. There's often a lot of struggle between different characters, between the hero and some of their counterparts. There's always sort of an investigation search going on for some kind of information or some kind of lost secret or lost weapon. Just a lot of really good, really deep storytelling. And something I think the series really benefits from is that it's not one continuous story, but that it's individual stories within these books. So you can really, if you find any of these books, pick it up, give it a read, and you'll be able to understand everything within it. The way he writes, he's able to, Brian Jakes is able to kind of take everything and put it into the story so that you can follow along no matter where you are in the series. Definitely don't need to be read in order, and you can kind of pick up or drop off any of the ones that you want. And there's a wide range of different kinds of stories that he tells within that are definitely worth your attention. And as a little bonus, pretty much every book has some kind of riddle or some kind of clue that's been left behind to some sort of secret or weapon or history or something. And this is something that I love about these books, is that the clues are always very clever. You can usually kind of figure it out on your own, but the riddles or the songs, or somehow there's like these seeds put in that the characters have to discover throughout the course of the book. And it's something that like I said, I love riddles, I love clues. So Brian Jakes does a great job of kind of threading these in through the story. And like I said, I think pretty much all of them have some sort of a riddle, some sort of a clue or a coded message or something that feeds into some great secret that helps the hero out. Definitely a great series. I definitely recommend checking them out. They make for a fun read, but really engaging, epic adventures, and something you won't regret. The Redwall series. And next up on my list is the Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling. Now, like I said, a number of these books on this list you've probably at least heard of or read yourselves. This is no exception. I'm certainly not the first person to put this on my list, and I won't be the last. I really like the Harry Potter series. It's something that I was sort of late getting to, as my parents, as many parents at the time, were a little bit hesitant to let us read the series. But my dad picked up the first book a number of years after it come out, and gave it a read, really liked it, really liked the characters, and finally talked my mom into letting us read them. And there was a time that we were reading through the series, like the four of us kids, or the three or four of us at the time, and we could not put these books down. I remember reading through, I think I read through the series in like a year, or maybe the last book hadn't come out yet. But I remember being on vacation with my family, and I remember vividly sitting on a couch in the cabin that we were staying at in Wisconsin, as my older brother and I were sitting reading the fourth book, The Goblet of Fire, which is my favorite, by the way. And I remember sitting on that couch next to my brother, and we were both reading the book. I was reading like from one side, and he was reading from the other, and we couldn't get enough that we couldn't even wait for each other to finish the books. Anything he would say, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you can't wait to hear what you think of how it ends," and I was racing to the end to find out what was going to go on. So these books have definitely left an impression in me. From the very first time that I started reading them. Something that I think J.K. Rowling does a great job with in these books is the magic and the mystery. There's definitely a sense of wonder that goes into this world. Even from the first couple of chapters, there's strange things happening, and you get to explore a really well done, really fully realized world in many aspects, all the way from Diagon Alley to Hogwarts itself, to the chambers and the kind of mystical areas within the castle. There's always like adventure, always secrets. You get to really explore a lot of the world, a lot of the magical world within these book series, as they kind of unfold in a very natural way. And there's a lot of elements of mystery. Like in every book, there's mysteries. And even when you think you understand something, later on it sort of unravels, and you see a more fully realized reality of what is actually going on behind the scenes, and what is the real history behind some of these characters. What are their real motivations? What secrets are being kept kind of behind locked doors, or behind various enchantments or whatever. I think it makes for really compelling storytelling to see sort of the magic unfold in front of you, and these mysteries that kind of unfurl and unravel in ways that are very very story centric, that really motivate you as a reader, as well as the characters that you're reading with, to go on this journey with them. J.K. Rowling also has a great sense of whimsy and wonder. As I've previously mentioned, kind of with a lot of the aspects of the magical world, there's sort of wonder all the way through. Certainly more focused towards the earlier books, but wonder is really something that kind of travels through. It just sort of matures with the books. There's a lot of whimsy. There's great funny characters that are always around. There's funny happenings, and even things that aren't intended to be funny can be very funny, as various things unravel, or everything that's going to go wrong is going to go wrong, but the characters will get out of it somehow. And I think it just makes for a great setting. It makes me feel, and I've said this before on my channel, but it makes me feel like a child again. Reading through these series, especially the first few books, really makes you feel like you're a kid running through the halls of Hogwarts and learning spells and getting into mischief with your friends. And I think that's something that's really reflected in the fan base and how passionate people are about the stories that she has told and that she's continuing to tell. But the thing I really appreciate about the Harry Potter series is its narrative development. Now, I know that sounds like a very hoity-toity, very educated term, but really what I mean here is how the stories seem to grow with the reader and with the characters. So obviously in the first book, Harry Potter starts out, he's about 11 years old. He's just a kid going through Hogwarts and kind of filled with the charm and the wonder that is characteristic of children as they kind of go through these circumstances. But then as he gets older, the books get longer, the books get deeper. You look more and more further and further into the magical world that is presented for us in these books. By book 7, the tone has totally shifted. The content is much more thematic, much more mature, much darker in certain areas. There's a lot to be said for the way that the book lengths even grow as Harry does. And by book 7, he is now 17, 18 years old, just on the cusp of adulthood, and has fully recognized the weight and responsibility that's put on him, the sort of dark secrets that were kept from him as a child, that he has now learned and gained responsibility, gained understanding of, and taken agency over the magical world as it stands. The issues become far more complex, the characters become far more complex. Not everything is as simple or one note as it may have been in the earlier books. And I think this is a great reflection on what adolescence or what adulthood, what that kind of journey through growing up is like for many of us, where we sort of have this simplistic worldview that becomes continually challenged and kind of opens up for us new possibilities, new dilemmas, and new issues as we progress. I think J.K. Rowling did a fantastic job of laying out so many of these themes, these tones, while keeping with the magic and the mystery and the whimsy of wonder throughout all of her books. There's certainly more or less in each book. There's certainly humor and whimsy and wonder within each of the books. It just looks a bit different, and it affects the characters in different ways. And as such, I think it affects the readers, the viewers, in different ways, as well as the tone slowly shifts, and you kind of see that things aren't as simple and magical as they may have appeared at the beginning. So these are just a few of the reasons why I always go back to the Harry Potter series. I think J.K. Rowling did a fantastic job creating and inhabiting these worlds and creating beautiful but complex stories, very interesting characters, things that really stick with you. And I think it's something that is reflected in the fandom, how it persists after so many years. New stories are being told, new exciting developments, and there's just a real passion behind these stories, and I think it's well deserved. And that will conclude my list of favorite book series, or books, at least for the moment. Just in going over these books, I realized how many book series there are that I haven't finished, that I've touched on, that I've kind of dabbled in, but haven't kind of gotten through, and here's a few of those. I plan on doing some further reviews as I kind of get further into some of these series. First of all on the list, you have Wheel of Time. Wheel of Time, I've read the first 5 or 6 books. The first 3 or 4 I've actually read a few times, and really enjoy them, really like the world that Robert Jordan has set up. Very curious, and I've heard great things about where the series goes. I know it's some of the seminal or the foundational fantasy series. It's really kind of held up there as one of the greatest epic fantasy series. So it's certainly something I want to continue on in. I'll probably at some point in time do a read-along where I'll read a book, do a review on it, and then kind of move on to the next one. Now, granted, there are, I think, what are there, 13 or 14 books in the series, as well as a couple other tangential or prequel books in the series. So that's going to take some time, but I want to dedicate myself to working my way through that series. Now, on this list, I do have The Lord of the Rings. Now, I have read this series. I read it years ago before, or kind of when the movies were coming out. It was actually one of the requirements that my parents gave me to watch the movies, was to read through the books first and then see the movies. So I have read these books. I enjoy the books, but I don't really remember a lot about the books themselves. I love the series and the franchise, the films, but I don't remember a lot specifically from the books. I do plan on doing a reread on these books. I plan on doing that leading up to the Amazon Prime Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power series that's coming out in September. I do plan on doing a reread of the original trilogy as well as the Silmarillion, and then if I may throw The Hobbit in there as well. Just kind of read up and ramp up to the release of what I'm hoping is going to be a great show. I also have the Mistborn trilogy on here. I'm actually about halfway through the first of these trilogies. I know Brandon Sanderson has written sort of his first three trilogy, and then sort of like set 100 years later, there's another trilogy, and I think he's working on another trilogy. So I am halfway through book 2 of the first trilogy, really enjoying it, really liking everything that I've read by Brandon Sanderson so far. I've really enjoyed. I like his world building, his story and his characters are very real, and there's a lot of catharsis in their storytelling, in their narratives, their journeys. The magic systems are incredible, very interesting, but I haven't read enough in this series to really kind of give a final say on, although I've heard good things. So I am kind of biding my time to finish the series. It's what I'm currently working through, so there will be videos coming out about this soon. Next up on the list, I have The Dark is Rising sequence by Susan Cooper. For those of you who don't know, this is a fantastic series. It's written sort of to a younger audience, but it's got some more mature, darker themes. In a similar vein to kind of like a Narnia, but definitely more gritty. There's definitely a darker aspect to these books and to the characters. There's a strange kind of ancient magic system. There's a lot of Arthurian legends and characters that kind of cross over with our modern world. Very interesting stories. I believe there's 5 in the series, and I actually haven't read any of them, but I listened to the audiobooks. I don't remember who did the audiobooks, but he did a great job, a fantastic job. I'll post up his name here. I definitely recommend checking him out. I've listened to, I think, the first like 3 or 4. Fascinating series, and I haven't gotten a chance to come back around, but I plan on working my way through that series as well. Last up, you can see here is The Way of Kings, or the Stormlight Archives. The Way of Kings is the first book in this series, again by my boy Brandon Sanderson. I have read The Way of Kings, the first book. I believe there are 5 books out now. I've only read the first one. Another series really want to work my way through. Loved the first book. Very interesting characters, very compelling storytelling, very intriguing world and magic system. I definitely want to dive back in. But these are chunky books, right? They're hefty. And each one, there's about 5 right now, out of a planned 10, I think, as well as kind of tying in some of his other Cosmere novels. I'll do videos on those, but this is a series that I also want to work my way through. So just in final review, like 90% of these books obviously are kind of within the fantasy realm. That's where I love, that's where I feel at home. That's driven me in so many of my own storytelling endeavors, mostly through games of Dungeons and Dragons that I've run or played in that are set within the fantasy settings, and sort of carry on with those classic fantasy tropes. I love that stuff. But I've realized that just in these books here, in this list here, I don't have many books on this list that are outside of kind of that fantasy realm. And I would love to kind of broaden my horizon. I want to read more fiction and nonfiction, very different genres, very different decades. I want to read more of the classics and kind of get a real well-rounded approach or understanding, appreciation for these books and these authors that have kind of defined history and literature. something that I love, something I'm very passionate about. I would love to hear from you. What are some of your favorite books, book series, or books that you've read? Anything that you recommend, anything that sits with you, sticks with you, you still think about to this day. Feel free to list those in the comments below, or do one better, make a video of your own. Make a video of you doing the same thing I'm doing, listing some of your favorite books that have really impacted you. I would love to see it. Share it down below, and I would be happy to take a look and comment on it as well. Thanks so much for sticking in there. Many more videos coming soon. Thanks for sticking around. We'll see you in the next one. Take care.